The Sega Dreamcast really doesn't get enough love or respect that it deserves, and one of the flagship games of this platform was Shenmue. If you've never played this game, it's very hard to describe what it's like, and I'm very much on a Dreamcast hype at the moment, so I've been playing My Dreamcast quite a lot, and I thought I wanted to make a video about one of my favourite games on the platform. When this game was released, there really wasn't anything else quite like it. Like, the gaming industry had just not seen an action-adventure game like this. By modern standards now, it's probably not the best game or best example of an action-adventure game, but calling it action-adventure is just a little bit, doesn't quite hit the mark of what this game actually is. It's more of like an interactive story with an absolutely insane level of detail that still has not been matched by many games. Even modern games that come out now on the PS5 and Xbox just haven't really got this standard of gameplay and game mechanics in it. But before I go deeper into this video, if you do enjoy retro gaming content, please remember to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment below if you have any memories of Shenmue or Shenmue or whatever you call it, because I don't really know how to pronounce the name of this game. I'm just going off guesswork and what other people say. Now, Shenmue was released in 1999 and is branded as an action-adventure game. It follows the story of Ryu Hazuki as he sets out on a revenge quest of the murder of his father, which happens right at the start of the game. So I'm going to try and stay off as many spoilers as I can, but that's basically the premise of the game. You're going after, in a sort of detective style, into the world to find out what's happened and why your father's been murdered. And the gameplay consists of a lot of investigation as you explore this open world, and you get into like many fights in the game as well, with like actual brawler fist fights that you have to learn martial arts to get good at. And it's also splashed in with a lot of quick time events, which, as far as I can remember, was some of the earliest sort of representation of quick time events in video games, and really set an industry standard for games that came after it. On release, the game was absolutely praised with its environmental detail and had a really intricate sort of day-night system, different weather effects, and hundreds of non-playable NPC characters that you could talk to. There are thousands of mini-games in this game, including forklift driving, which is its own thing, it's so fun, and thousands of objects to interact with as well. However, on release, the game's sales was sort of not as good as Sega were expecting, and it didn't actually recoup any costs of development, because at the time it was one of the most expensive game developments that's ever existed, and it was considered by Sega as a financial failure, even though it received amazing reviews. And at the time, the graphics were amazing. Look at these graphics now. This is a 1999 game. At the time, the game actually had a budget of marketing costs and production of roughly around $70 million, which was the most expensive game ever made at the time, and it didn't recuperate anywhere near that amount in sales, mainly due to the Dreamcast not being as successful as Sega wanted. But as far as I remember from my childhood, everyone that had a Sega Dreamcast just had this game as well. I can't remember if it came bundled with the game, or there was a lot of like packages from like Toys R Us and Game that came with Shenmue, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to keep pronouncing that name differently every time. Now, the game did get a sequel of Shenmue 2, which came out sort of a lot later on, and then famously a third game came out in 2018, because the game was not really finished. It ended on a cliffhanger and no one ever thought they were going to see it, but after a successful Kickstarter campaign, a third game was released, and people are a bit hit and miss on the third game. The game was actually ported, both Shenmue 1 and 2 were both ported to the original Xbox as well, as because that was one of the only consoles at the time that could handle this sort of graphics engine, and those games were also fantastic. I do need to actually pick up a copy of them games as well. Now, going into the development of the game. The game was created by Yu Suzuki, who had been with Sega since 1983, and he had previously created some really famous Sega arcade titles, absolute staples of the platform. His gamography included games such as Hang On, Outrun, and Virtua Fighter. Virtua Fighter is actually one of my favourite fighting game franchises on the Sega Saturn. I love the first one, and the second one as well is just so much better. It's like the first one, but improved way more. It's one of them games actually I should do a video about because I absolutely adore that game. The game was actually originally intended to be on the Sega Saturn, but due to the Sega Saturn also not selling well at all and just limitations of the hardware, it moved on to the Dreamcast. Now the game was actually sort of in-house developed by a studio called AM2, which are sort of like famous among, I think they're Yu Suzuki's like actual development team among Sega, and they sort of spearheaded the development of this game. They did so much research. The actual town that you're in the game is modelled on a town called Dobuka in Yokosuka. Again, I've probably butchered the pronunciation of that. Now, one of the things that's very notorious about this game, that if you do play the English translation, the English dub is horrible, but also has this sort of level of charm to it, which makes it very fun to play and ridiculous, because some of the voice acting is some of the worst stuff you've ever heard. I'm talking like almost as bad as Resident Evil 1 on the PlayStation 1. But that doesn't really detract from the story and the gameplay of the video game, and is still a reason to play the game. It just adds an extra level that was never intended by the developers and creators of the game to play it now for Western audiences, just because it adds that little comedic factor to it. Now, when the game was released, it was sort of hit with critical acclaim. Like, it got very high scores. We're talking 95 out of 100s, 9 out of 10s, like very high scores. There's not really any score that was on the low side at all, which makes it even weirder why this game was considered a commercial failure. And it basically comes down to the fact that just not a lot of people had a Dreamcast, so people just didn't play it. Now, when reading through some of the reviews, some people criticize invisible walls in the game, but like, come on, nothing had ever been seen like this before in video games, and there had to be some limitations, which I think at the time, even though it got such high scores, people still like expected more from it. And I think that's just like, you got to be realistic. It's 1999. Like, what else were you thinking? But when I first played this game, I absolutely adored it. I was completely captured by the story of this game. I didn't actually know all of the extra stuff until I played it 3, 4, 5 times through. Weirdly enough, I've never actually completed the second game, and I've never played the third game. It's only ever been the first game that I have repeatedly played, because there's just so much to do in this game. So many things are packed into it. The graphics were amazing for the time, and just all the characters that you meet along the way are very annoying in the English dub, but also just fantastically written, well designed, and just animated so well for a early sort of 1999 game, not an early 2000s game. For the longest time when playing this game, I didn't realize that you had to practice martial arts to get better at fighting in the game, which is just a weird mechanic, because mostly, like most games, you're used to just being able to fight and your character being good at fighting, but you actually have to take lessons to get better at fighting in this game. Otherwise you get absolutely trounced by people, which is another thing I seem to remember like a lot of the time when growing up, that this game was so hard, like one of the hardest games I've ever played at the time. But that's mainly because the game doesn't hold your hand. It expects you to go out and figure out things by yourself. You do have a little journal that helps you keep track of different things that you have in the game and what's going on, but it's not really the best for knowing what to do. And the game just really leaves it in your hands. It just adds this level of realism to an old game that just like really makes you take the initiative and do the things that you like you have to figure out for yourself. You just have to work on it yourself and figure out what to do. And even modern games don't do that anymore. Every game you play now is so focused on showing you exactly how to have fun that you don't ever get the opportunity to go out and have your own fun and discover your own story, which is something that this game, I have to praise it for. It, even though the story is written for you, because of the way it's designed and the way it feels, you feel like you're creating the story as you go along and as you sort of discover what the plot behind this is. Again, I'm trying to keep off from any spoilers, because I think it's one of these games that you just have to experience for yourself. But I personally think it's an absolute triumph in storytelling and sort of gameplay, that how it blends it all together so well. And even now, like looking at the capture footage that I have here, the game still looks amazing. It looks like a real lived-in environment. You can clearly see the people, the places, what to do. Even then, just the little idle animation of watching your character just sort of like rock back and forth because you've been standing around for so long. It's just an interesting little thing that the game does for you. To be fair, playing it on the Dreamcast, the controls are a little bit weird, but you get used to it very quickly, and it's very fun. Like once you've got over that initial like one analog and how to run, how to sprint, how to move, how to talk to people, it's different. It's not what you would expect the controls to be, but it works out so well now. But yeah, that's been me talking about Shenmue or Shenmue or Shenmue, whatever you want to call it. One of my favourite all-time Dreamcast games and one of the absolute staples of the Dreamcast platform. I know that there are a lot of fans out there for this game. So let me know in the comments below, did you ever play this game? Have you completed this game? Out of the 3 games that are released, which one is your favourite? Should I go back to play 2? I've got 2 on the Dreamcast, I've just never actually completed it. So do you think I should go back and play that, or would you even like to see a complete playthrough of these games on my channel? Because I am more than happy to play more Dreamcast on my channel. I also just want to say that that angle he's talking to me at the moment just doesn't look helpful. Like, looks like he's going to crank his neck so painful. Such an unnatural way to turn your neck, especially like mid-conversation with someone. I would be a little bit freaked out if someone was doing that to me. But yeah, that's me talking about Shenmue on the original Dreamcast. It's one of my favourite games. It's one of the best games that's ever been made. If you disagree, then that's fine, you can disagree, but let me know. If you have enjoyed this video, please remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, because there's going to be plenty more retro gaming content coming out. I post videos more or less every weekday. Very soon I'm going to be doing live streams again. It's going to be a lot of fun. There's going to be more stuff going on. I'm very excited to get sort of the ball rolling on the content that I create on this channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.
Mishima-san.
Oh.